February 18, 1963. 9:42 p.m. West 126th Street, Harlem. The snow had stopped an hour earlier, but the cold stayed. It clung to coats, to knuckles, to the breath of a 21-year-old heavyweight contender pacing outside a brownstone with no sign and no doorbell. Muhammad Ali wasn't pacing for cameras. There were none. He was pacing because his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Inside that building sat Bumpy Johnson. Ali hadn't come for protection. He hadn't come for money. He came because he was out of options. Earlier that afternoon, he'd been told plainly that if he didn't quiet down, fights would disappear. Promoters were tired of the talk. Managers were nervous. Sponsors were already gone. The heavyweight title shot he'd been promised felt like smoke. He'd run his mouth and now the room was closing. At 6:30 p.m., his trainer had told him to lie low. At 7:10, a reporter had warned him the press was turning. At 8:05, a man he trusted said, "You might want to leave New York." Ali didn't leave. He walked north. At 9:42, the door opened. No greeting. No smile. Just a look that measured him and decided he wasn't dangerous yet. 10 minutes, the man said. That's all. Ali stepped inside. This wasn't just about boxing anymore. Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, as he was beginning to call himself, had become a problem for people who controlled how problems got solved. The year was 1963. The civil rights movement was intensifying. Kennedy was president. The nation was splitting along lines of race and ideology. And in the middle of it all stood a young man who wouldn't shut up, wouldn't play the game, wouldn't pretend that being black and loud and ambitious was acceptable. Ali had been winning. That was the first mistake. A young fighter winning too fast attracts attention. He'd knocked out opponents. He'd talked trash. He'd predicted rounds. He'd quoted poetry. He'd done everything a boxer wasn't supposed to do. He'd made himself matter beyond the ring. But there were rules. Unspoken rules that governed how black athletes behaved in America in 1963. You won. You smiled. You thanked the promoters. You donated money to white causes. You dated white women carefully. You spoke in measured tones. You reminded people that despite your success, you understood your place. Ali had broken every rule. The promoters started talking. Madison Square Garden people, they called themselves. The men who decided which fighters got title shots, which ones disappeared into obscurity. They were nervous about Ali's connections to the Nation of Islam. They were uncomfortable with his refusal to apologize for his brash statements. They were worried that his influence might inspire other young black fighters to think they had rights too. So they began the squeeze. Phone calls stopped being returned. Fight opportunities dried up. Sponsors pulled out. Managers started distancing themselves, telling Ali he needed to adjust his approach, needed to be smarter, needed to understand that the system didn't reward loud black men, it punished them. By mid-February, Ali was running out of options. No fights booked. No clear path forward. The promise of a title shot seemed to evaporate every time he got close. And everywhere he went, the same message: be quiet. Be compliant. Shrink yourself. That was when someone, Ali would never say who, told him about Bumpy Johnson. In 1963, Bumpy Johnson was 59 years old. He'd controlled Harlem's underworld for nearly 30 years. He'd survived Dutch Schultz, survived the FBI, survived prison. He'd negotiated with Lucky Luciano. He'd made deals with the Italian mafia. He'd built an empire that nobody could touch because he understood something fundamental: real power wasn't about violence. It was about leverage. Bumpy was a legend in Harlem. But he was more than just a gangster. He was a protector. When families couldn't pay rent, Bumpy paid it. When police harassed black businesses, Bumpy made phone calls that made the harassment stop. When Italian mobsters tried to muscle in on local operations, Bumpy pushed back. He'd created a code, a system where Harlem's black community was defended by one of their own. And he was a man who understood the value of standing firm. Ollie had never met Bumpy before. But he knew the story. Everyone in Harlem knew the story. There was a man who sat in a restaurant and didn't move when 6 armed mafia soldiers walked in. There was a man who survived 12 gunshots and ordered retaliation within 6 hours. There was a man who could walk into a room and change the power dynamic just by existing. That was who Ollie needed to see. The brownstone was modest. Nothing that suggested power. Just a building on a Harlem street where important conversations happened away from witnesses and reporters. The man who'd answered the door led Ollie upstairs. No security visible. No guards. Just Bumpy sitting in a simple room, waiting. Bumpy didn't ask about boxing. He asked why Ollie was there. Ollie didn't boast. He didn't rhyme. He told the truth. They want me quiet, he said. They want me smaller. Bumpy listened without blinking. He knew what that meant. He also knew what it cost. Because if Ollie chose to stand his ground, there would be consequences that punches couldn't fix. Licenses, contracts, the phone not ringing. The kind of pressure that squeezes slowly. The kind that breaks people who aren't prepared for it. And if he chose to fold, he would keep the fights and lose himself. 10 minutes. That was the window. 10 minutes to decide which loss he could live with. Outside, a car idled too long at the corner. Across the street, a man pretended to read a newspaper that never turned a page. Ollie noticed. He always noticed. Inside, Bumpy finally spoke. "You're asking the wrong question," he said. Ollie leaned forward. "What's the right one?" Bumpy's answer didn't sound like advice. It sounded like a warning. "The right question isn't whether they'll let you speak," Bumpy said quietly. "The right question is whether you're willing to pay the cost when they decide to make you pay. You think the system is just going to step aside because you're talented? Because you're fast? Because you're right?" Ollie was quiet. "The system doesn't work that way," Bumpy continued. "Power doesn't give up territory. It crushes the people who try to take it. So before you decide to be loud, before you decide to stand firm, you need to understand something fundamental: they will come at you. Not with fists. With silence. With isolation. With a phone that doesn't ring. They'll make you disappear while you're still alive." Bumpy leaned back. "So what I'm asking you is, are you ready for that? Because once you choose to stand, the choice gets made for you in every other way." When Ollie walked back into the cold at 10:14 p.m., he wasn't relieved. He was scared. Because the choice Bumpy had given him didn't protect him. It aimed him straight at the fire. Would Ollie do what kept him safe or what would make enemies he couldn't outbox? A man stepped out of the shadow like he'd always been there. His name was Calvin Moore. Calvin wasn't famous. He wasn't feared. He was a junior boxing promoter with a pressed coat and a persistent cough. 34 years old. 2 kids. A wife who thought he was doing accounting for a shipping firm. A mortgage that was already 2 payments behind. Calvin also controlled one thing Ollie needed desperately: access. Small venues. Regional fights. The kind that kept a boxer active when the big rooms went quiet. Calvin's phone calls decided whether you stayed sharp or rusted out. And tonight, Calvin was scared. "You shouldn't have gone in there," he said, stepping out of the darkness. Ollie didn't ask how Calvin knew. He already understood. News moved fast when men like Bumpy were involved. "I didn't have a choice," Ollie said. Calvin laughed, but it cracked halfway through and turned into a cough. He pressed a handkerchief to his mouth. When he pulled it away, there was a faint stain of red. "They're already talking," Calvin said. "Madison Square Garden people. 2 managers. 1 sanctioning official. They think you're becoming a problem." Ollie stopped walking. "A problem for who?" "For everybody who signs checks," Calvin said. That was Calvin's problem, too. If Ollie went quiet, Calvin could keep booking him. Money would come in. The kid's tuition might stay paid. His wife might never ask why he was gone so late. If Ollie didn't, if he followed whatever path that 10-minute conversation had pointed him toward, Calvin would be forced to choose. And that choice wasn't theoretical. 2 weeks earlier, Calvin had been warned. Not threatened. Warned. A senior promoter had leaned in close and said, "You back the wrong fighter, you won't get calls returned." Calvin had nodded. He always nodded. That's how you survived long enough to matter. But now Ollie was standing in front of him, eyes clear, jaw set, still breathing hard from more than the cold. "What did he tell you?" Calvin asked. Ollie hesitated. That alone was an answer. "He told me the fight wouldn't just be in the ring anymore," Ollie said. "He said I'd be tested somewhere else first." Calvin's stomach dropped. "Tested how?" Ollie didn't answer immediately. He looked past Calvin, scanning the street again. The car from earlier was gone, but something else had replaced it. A man leaning against a storefront, pretending to fix his glove. "They want me to make myself small," Ollie said finally. "And he told me what happens if I don't." Calvin swallowed. He understood now. This wasn't about protection or favors. It was about exposure. If Ollie refused to bend, someone would make an example quietly. No headlines. Just enough pressure to remind everyone who decided careers. Calvin thought of his son's asthma medicine. His daughter's piano lessons. He thought of his wife folding laundry, humming, believing him. He thought of the phone calls that would stop. The meetings that would be cancelled. The subtle but absolute erasure of Calvin Moore from the boxing world. "You have to slow down," Calvin said. "Just for now. Let things cool." Ollie shook his head. "They don't cool," he said. "They close." A horn blared nearby. The man at the storefront straightened up. Another figure appeared at the end of the block. Calvin realized something then, something he hadn't expected. The decision wasn't Ollie's alone anymore. If Ollie moved forward, Calvin would be seen as moving with him. And if Ollie fell, Calvin would be pulled down, too. "I need an answer," Ollie said. "Are you with me, or are you stepping away?" Calvin felt the street tighten around them. Because the wrong answer wouldn't just cost him money. It might cost him safety. Someone was about to force the choice for him. The man at the storefront started walking. Not fast. Not slow. The way someone moves when they don't want to look like they're closing distance, but are. Calvin noticed first. "We can't talk here," he said. Ollie didn't move. "That's the problem," he replied. "Everywhere we go, it's here." Calvin stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If you do what he's suggesting, they'll say you're being difficult. Unstable. They'll freeze you out without ever touching you." Ollie looked at him. "And if I don't?" Calvin exhaled through his nose. "Then they'll find another way." The man from the storefront crossed the street now. No hurry. No eye contact. Calvin felt his chest tighten. The cough was coming back, scraping up from somewhere deep. "You think I don't know what they're capable of?" Calvin said. "I've seen fighters disappear. Not lose. Disappear. No calls. No fights. No explanation." Ollie nodded. He wasn't naive. He just wasn't willing to shrink. They already decided I'm loud, Ollie said. Quiet won't save me. That was when Calvin realized Ollie wasn't asking for advice. He was asking for alignment. Another figure appeared near the corner. Same coat as the first man. Same posture. Too similar to be coincidence. Calvin counted exits without meaning to. One alley. One open storefront. Neither felt safe. This isn't the way to do it, Calvin said. There are smarter paths. Ollie's voice dropped. This is the only honest one. Calvin thought of the meeting scheduled for the next morning. Coffee with a senior promoter. A chance to smooth things over. A chance to say the right things and keep his calendar full. That meeting depended on one thing, Calvin showing he could still control his fighter. You don't have to prove anything tonight, Calvin said. Just wait. Ollie shook his head. Waiting is proving something. The first man stopped 10 feet away. The second stayed near the corner. No words. Just presence. Calvin understood the signal. Someone wanted to see which way he leaned. Listen to me, Calvin said, his voice almost breaking. If I stand with you and this goes wrong, I don't just lose work. I lose protection. I lose leverage. You lose what they give you, Ollie said. Not what you earn. That hit harder than Calvin expected because it was true. And because earning had already cost him more than he admitted. The first man finally spoke. You gentlemen need help finding somewhere? It was polite. That made it worse. Calvin stepped slightly in front of Ollie without thinking. The move surprised both of them. We're fine, Calvin said. Just talking. The man smiled thinly. That's what I heard. The second man shifted his weight, watching Calvin now, not Ollie. That was the test. Calvin felt sweat under his collar despite the cold. He realized suddenly that the people deciding his future weren't in offices or boardrooms. They were standing right here, waiting to see if he would step aside. You should go, Calvin whispered to Ollie. Now. Ollie didn't move. If I go, they'll say you chose them. Calvin closed his eyes for half a second. That was the choice. Loyalty versus survival. Not dramatic. Not noble. Just real. Calvin opened his eyes and looked at the man in front of him. We're done talking, he said. He's with me. The smile vanished. The man nodded once and stepped back. Understood, he said. They turned and walked away slowly, deliberately, like nothing had happened. Calvin's knees nearly gave out. By morning, the consequences arrived. Calvin's scheduled events were quietly reassigned. Phone calls stopped. The coffee meeting vanished from the calendar. A polite message came through an intermediary. We'll be going in a different direction. Calvin hadn't signed anything. He didn't have to. The message was clear. And Ollie woke up to headlines that didn't accuse, but framed. Ollie uncooperative. Young contender. Difficult behind the scenes. Nothing false. Nothing provable. His trainer didn't call. Instead, a short note was delivered to his hotel, typed, no signature. This can still be fixed. Ollie folded it once, then again, then tore it cleanly in half. He went to the gym anyway. The owner looked uncomfortable when Ollie walked in. Just for today, the man said. We're booked. Ollie nodded and left without argument. Outside, snow started falling again. By nightfall, Ollie understood the cost of that 10-minute conversation. No fights booked. No calls returned. No one standing beside him except one man in a hospital bed, coughing into his sleeve, wondering how he would explain this to his wife. Ollie visited Calvin once before leaving New York. Calvin tried to apologize. You didn't do this, Ali said. You just paid for it. And as Ali walked out of the hospital, he realized something heavy and unavoidable. Standing your ground didn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looked like everyone else stepping away. And the real loss wasn't the fights. It was the people who couldn't afford to stay. Within weeks, Ali was fighting in borrowed rings. Small venues. No promotion. No money. But he was fighting. And more importantly, he was speaking. He continued to talk about the Nation of Islam. He continued to refuse to compromise. He continued to be loud in a world that wanted him silent. The system didn't crush him immediately. It just made everything harder. Every step cost more. Every victory was hollow without recognition. Every conversation was monitored. Every phone call was watched. But he didn't break. 3 months later, Muhammad Ali stood in a borrowed locker room, wrapping his own hands. No trainer. No familiar voices. Just the sound of tape pulling tight and the echo of a crowd that wasn't supposed to be there. The fight existed because too many people had tried to make him disappear and failed. But the cost hadn't vanished. Calvin never returned to promotion. His lungs never fully recovered. He took a job far from boxing. One that paid less, but didn't ask questions. They stopped talking after a while. Not from anger. From gravity. Lives pulling apart. Ali won that night. Clean. Decisive. The headlines came back slowly, carefully rewritten. The same people who'd frozen him out began using new words. Resilient. Misunderstood. Maturing. No one apologized. And that was the final lesson. The 10 minutes in Harlem didn't make Ali safer. They didn't protect the people around him. They didn't even guarantee success. They did something colder. They taught him that standing firm doesn't stop the machine. It reveals who gets caught in it with you. Years later, people would talk about confidence. About courage. About destiny. They wouldn't talk about the promoter with the cough, or the trainer who chose access over loyalty, or the silence that nearly worked. But Ali remembered. Because becoming a champion didn't just mean winning fights. It meant learning how many people can't afford for you to be yourself and deciding whether you do it anyway. Bumpy Johnson had given Ali no promises that night. No guarantees. No special treatment. He'd simply asked a question: what are you willing to sacrifice to be free? Ali had answered with his life. And that answer, more than any punch he would ever throw, changed history. The 10 minutes in Harlem weren't about boxing. They were about understanding that real power, the kind that matters, isn't granted by systems. It's claimed by people willing to pay the price when the system decides to make them pay. That was the lesson Bumpy Johnson had learned 30 years before. And that was the lesson he passed to a young man who would become one of the greatest athletes of the 20th century. Not through words. Through silence. Not through promises. Through understanding. Not through protection. Through truth.